Welcome back to the 1-0 podcast. I'm Seth Engle,
I'm Spencer Ripchik.
and we had a lot happen this week. There's not usually too much that goes on at the end of February, but we had a pretty eventful week. It was capped by the departure of John Scott Jr., who was Penn State's defensive line coach for the past 2 years. And, he heads out now and he's going to the NFL, reportedly to the Detroit Lions. Still yet to see exactly what that position is with the Lions, but there should be an official announcement pretty soon. And then right after that, there was a commitment. 4-star linebacker Kari Jackson became the third member of Penn State's 2024 class to commit. And this is all happening, right before the NFL draft combine. So we'll kind of check all those boxes and discuss everything there. So I want to start off with John Scott Jr., because this was a coach that really developed Penn State's defensive line from the time that Sean Spencer left a few years ago, and brought it to number 6 in the nation in sacks this year. I believe they had 43 on the year, so it was a really impressive year for John Scott in that defensive line room. So Spencer, where do you think Penn State goes from here, and do you have any potential candidates in mind?
Right off the bat, I feel like, he's already kind of taken over on Twitter. Deion Barnes, the Penn State analyst, who was the assistant defensive line coach for some time with John Scott. I feel like he's probably the right move to go towards. But, everyone has been saying that, oh, no, he's really, really young. He doesn't really coach a position by himself yet. So this might be too early for him. And Penn State has the resources to go out and get some guys. So I feel like first they're going to look at Deion Barnes and see if he can take over. But the one I really like, and a lot of people have turned their heads towards Elijah Robinson from Texas A&M, but that's just not going to happen. He's there for quite some time, and that would be a hefty contract to pay off. But I think they go back out and they get Sean Spencer, the guy who went to the New York Giants, and bring him back from Florida. As of late, Florida's had a lot of coaches leave the program. So Sean Spencer leaving wouldn't be too out of the blue. And obviously he's that defensive line when he was there was just a bunch of studs. Odafe Owe, they had Micah, Yetur Gross-Matos. all those guys are just studs. And just bringing him back would be a lot. And then he's on an estimated salary of $1 million per on 3. So, Penn State would have to dish out some money to bring him back here, but I feel like he's the right fit for the role if they don't go in the direction of Deion Barnes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Those definitely are the big three. I think when you look right away, Deion Barnes and Elijah Robinson, both former players at Penn State, and Sean Spencer obviously coached just a few years ago there, held the same role as John Scott. There are questions, though, with Deion Barnes. This is a young guy who, has only been a graduate assistant. He was just promoted to an analyst position in January, and now we're already talking about him maybe jumping up into that defensive line role already. So, there is a lot of question there whether he is ready for that. Maybe Penn State can, get something better and then keep Deion Barnes on until maybe it's time for him to earn that promotion. But from the players that he's coached, it seems like Barnes is, pretty legit. It seemed like it was almost a team effort of John Scott and Barnes working with that defensive line room. PJ Mustipher talked today at the combine about it. He said, I hope Coach Franklin does hire Deion Barnes because of that tandem with John Scott. And Elijah Robinson, as you mentioned as well, that's going to be hard to pull from Texas A&M. This is one of the brightest up and coming coaches in the whole country. This is a guy I was thinking Penn State could target when Brent Pry left to be the head coach of Virginia Tech, where I was saying, okay, well, maybe they bring in Robinson as the next defensive coordinator. And now maybe we're talking about them maybe pulling him to be D-line coach. It's going to be hard. Sean Spencer, maybe. We'll see what happens there. There are also questions with him. Like, was his locker room mentality, was his persona, did it really translate to the field as well as John Scott did? Like, how are they going to follow that up? So those are my thoughts, right off the bat.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the only question mark with Deion Barnes is just his age. I mean, has the experience. He's coached these high level guys. But yeah, like you said, Elijah Robinson, I feel like he'd be like he'd be like the home run hire. And I also think the only way they bring Elijah Robinson is if they make him like an assistant coach somehow,
Yeah,
which I think Anthony Poindexter's already assistant, so we have two assistant coaches or something like that. Or
like
yeah,
assistant to a head coach, or
yeah. That's the only way I'd because I mean he's already an assistant coach at Texas A&M, so he's not going to go down, I don't
yeah,
think. And yeah, and then Sean Spencer, the same thing. He's the co-defensive coordinator right now for Florida, so they'd probably have to make him the co-defensive coordinator here at Penn State. So yeah, I feel like the most logical option is they go with Deion Barnes and just promote him and see how it goes. I mean, they can always get somebody else if it doesn't
yeah.
go well or something like that. But I feel like he's probably going to be pretty close to being the next um, Penn State D line coach.
Yeah, and I mean there also are other names down the line too. I mean we can get into Jess Simpson from Duke, or Andrew Jackson from West Virginia, or even Kenny Martin from UCF. Those are all names that have been thrown into the hat a little bit. So Penn State has options. There certainly are options on the table. We'll kind of just see what direction they go in. But I mean, from the last few coaching hires they've had, most of them have been, pretty successful. It's a little different than when Taylor Stubblefield left, because that was, Penn State's own will. They wanted to get rid of him. This is a little different because, you know, John Scott was good. This is a guy you got to replace with someone who can match whatever John Scott brought to the table, and then maybe, some more. So moving forward, I mean, Kari Jackson came next. He was the 2024 commit, second linebacker to commit, and third overall in that class. Have you watched his film at all? What have you seen from him? It looks like he's, a pretty straight up outside linebacker. Just want to see maybe what he brings to the table there.
Yeah, so I've done a little bit of research on him. I mean, he's another Michigan commit from Penn State, which is very, very big for Penn State recruiting in Michigan. And yeah, he looked like an outside linebacker. He has the speed. He's got the size. It's 6'2", 215. It's a pretty big dude. So he's really going to be – I saw he was very good at flooding holes and stuff. So, yeah, I think he can be a pretty big impact. And they already got one linebacker in the class. So Penn State's – I mean, straight – the first three commits for the class of 2024 are all 4-stars. So Penn State's already like hot on the trail for the 2024 class, coming off a really, really successful 2022 and then potentially 2023 class.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to linebackers too. Penn State brought in Tony Rojas in the 23 class, and then they also brought in Kavion Keys as well. And we'll see where Dakari Nelson goes. He's more of a in the box safety. We'll see if he transitions eventually to linebacker too. But I mean, they're bringing in high profile linebackers. They're trying to stick with that, LBU kind of name. And it seems like it's working out. I mean, it's a good sign when two of your first three commits in a class are linebackers, if that's really what you're trying to promote. And I think that's a good idea too, especially when you have a guy like Micah Parsons in the NFL. And you have a guy like Abdul Carter who's budding up now. You say, well, if you're a linebacker, why wouldn't you come to Penn State? So that seems to me like what they're starting to build there. And I think Manny Diaz has a lot to do with that. We'll see how long he sticks around, and that could, play a part potentially in where they go with defensive line hires. I mean, maybe they look Al Washington, who's worked with both defensive linemen and linebackers before, and they bring him in, and when Manny Diaz leaves, they move Al Washington over to linebackers coach, and then they bring back up Dion to be D line. We'll see what happens there. I mean, but there are a lot of moving pieces, and I think Manny Diaz is right in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think Manny Diaz is a big reason why you saw the success with Abdul Carter for just 1 year with Diaz. I mean, if you're a linebacker right now, and after Micah, the best linebacker in the NFL, and now Abdul, who's looking very, very good, looked like he didn't really look like a freshman in his first year. But yeah, the linebackers at Penn State are just continuing to grow. I would say, and Kari Jackson is another addition to that LBU name, pretty much pipeline.
Yeah, for sure. We talk so much about linebackers, but there is no linebacker, currently invited to the NFL draft combine for Penn State this year. That kicked off. Well, it's kicking off officially on Thursday with workouts, but media availability started on Wednesday. So we have Jair Brown, PJ Mustipher, Joey Porter Jr., Juice Scruggs, Brenton Strange, Mitchell Tinsley, and Parker Washington. We talked a little bit about Mustipher and what he said about Deion Barnes. He also, dished out, some of the team meetings he's had. I think Mustipher's great in avails. I mean, he's always been like that. It's interesting to see when you go on Twitter and people are like, well, this guy was a great interviewee. It's like, yeah, we've known that for a couple of years, man. So I think that's a little funny, but I think there are some guys here that really could, use a boost from the combine. I think there are certain guys, especially who, we've thought were great all along, that really just haven't really stuck out in these rankings. So who are some names that stick out to you right away that maybe you think could use some help from the combine?
So the first name that sticks out after you read those is Mitch Tinsley, because I feel like in the offense this year, he got a lot of attention, but he didn't get as much attention as like in Western Kentucky, where they threw the ball all the time. Penn State this year dominantly ran the ball, so he didn't really get to show all that much of like what he could do, even though he did show it sometimes. And he obviously played really good in the postseason bowls as well. So yeah, I think, and people are talking about him all over the place, making all these unbelievable catches at all these pro invite games that he got invited to. So I feel like he can be someone that could definitely improve his draft stock at the NFL Combine or the Pro Day. And I feel like another one, Jair Brown could also improve his draft stock. I mean, James Franklin spoken highly of him all year long, saying that people are sleeping on Jair. And I feel like if he has a really good showing at the NFL Combine, people might open his eyes and be like, oh, maybe I should need to take another look at this guy's film, because maybe we are sleeping on Jair Brown. I mean, he was the tied leader in the interceptions a couple of years ago. So he's a ball hawk, and I feel like he can definitely improve his draft stock if he has a strong showing. And he's on Instagram and stuff. He's been showing that he's been putting up crazy numbers as a safety who's a little bit over 200 pounds.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're starting to see a little bit more of Jair Brown pop into people's lists. Daniel Jeremiah said that Jair Brown was his top safety on his big board. I don't think we've seen that from anyone yet, which is crazy because Jair Brown's been one of the top safeties in the country for the past 2 years, and he's played the position in completely different ways. So you can kind of stick him in, however you want. If you're an NFL team, he plays free safety very well. I mean, he showed that when he tied the lead for interceptions 2 years ago. And then this year, he was in more of an in the box role like Jaquan Brisker had. And, he shined there, and he shined as a leader. And it doesn't really make sense to me why he's been so low on people's boards when all he's done was produce. I mean, I know a lot of the time with the NFL, it's like you look at their body, you look at, okay, like what are some of their intangibles that stick out? But like if you watch his tape, like it doesn't lie. Like it's hard to pick a game that he had that he didn't do his job well. I mean, he always came in and kind of just played exceptionally well. He was always one of those guys you didn't have to worry about. So Jair Brown's 100% one of those guys. And I think he'll do really well in those interviews too, which can boost your draft stock a little bit too. Parker Washington, we talked about interviews a little bit. I'm not sure if Parker's even going to be on the field. He was still in a boot at the Rose Bowl. I don't know if he's ready yet. We don't know exactly what the injury was, but he was in a boot for quite some time, so it's possible he doesn't work out. But I mean, he's going to need to do well in those interviews, because that might be all he has from this trip to Indianapolis. Mitchell Tinsley shined in some of those postseason All-Star games, and then I think another guy is Juice Scruggs is on the way up. Juice Scruggs did really well at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and now he's in a position where, okay, well, now he can put it on the field and show these, a bunch of NFL scouts exactly, what he could do. And he can play inside, he can play center if he really wants to. So, I mean, we'll kind of see what happens there, but I think those are my big names to look for.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Juice is very good at interviews from what we've seen over the years he's been at Penn State. I feel like, PJ has already been very good. Like you said earlier, people have been talking to him and he's been very good at interviewing. Brent Strange could also improve his draft stock there. Uh, if he catches the ball well, he's made some incredible catches this year with that one catch. I forget what game, it might have been Rutgers or something, where he caught that off the guy's back, or it was Maryland or some red team. But yeah, he's looked very good this year, and he can improve his draft stock easily if he puts up fast numbers. Or he's a big dude, so if he puts up like really good 40 times or cone drill or whatever, he could improve on draft boards too. But yeah, I feel like you said, Parker and Mitchell are gonna have a pretty tough time because the wide receiver of the class this year is pretty good. So if they want to get up in those early rounds or even drafted at all, they're gonna need to perform pretty well on at these combine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Brendan Strange is not your everyday tight end. I mean, he's a bruiser. He was one of the best blockers on the team. He was also one of the top receivers on the team, though, but not in the ways that you'd expect a Penn State tight end to be. He's not like Pat Fryermuth or Mike Gesicki. He was his own beast, but he played the position really well this year. In short passing plays. Didn't really go out and pass coverage too much, but as the season went on, we started to see that a little more. So we'll kind of see what goes on from him. And then Joey Porter Jr. is just a freak of nature. I mean, he's gonna excel. I mean, you just look at him. He's built like Sauce Gardner. I think he's actually a little bigger than he is too. I think NFL scouts just want to see whether he can really cover, up close with that body that he has. And as we've seen week in and week out, we know he'll be all right. It's whether teams are targeting him or not. He's one of the hardest guys to get covered by. So, I mean, that's what the week's really looking like here. Workouts are going to start on Thursday, and that's going to go until the end of the week. Should be a pretty fun week. Seven guys, as we mentioned before. And we'll see what happens with that John Scott departure, who the replacement's going to be, whether it's Deion Barnes or an outside source, how Penn State keeps building that 2024 class. If they go back to another linebacker, we'll see that in the near future. But I think that's all for us today.
Yeah, I think they just want to add to that. I feel like this defensive line coach is going to be announced pretty soon, considering how fast Marcus Hagans was announced. But I feel like they had that in the works. I don't know if they knew John was going to leave, but I feel like it won't be too long before we know who the new Penn State defensive line coach is going to be.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I'm Seth Engle.
I'm Spencer Ripchik.
This is the 1-0 Pod. You can find us at 1-0 Pod on Twitter and collegian.psu.edu online. Thank you. Peace.